Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Bear Down Ballers right here on the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm Ryan Wall, joined once again by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, Arizona won their sixth straight basketball game, something that we could only have dreamed of a couple weeks, a month, 2 months ago when they were on their losing streak. But Arizona moved to 4-0 in Big 12 play. They beat UCF 88 to 80. They're 4-0 in Big 12 play, which puts them at the top of the Big 12, tied with number 2 Iowa State and number 10 Houston. So Arizona is on fire right now. They had 5 players in double figures, and 6 of their 7 players in their rotation against UCF this past Saturday scored at least 9 points. One of their best team performances of the year for sure, without a doubt. But how are you doing today? And what were your thoughts on this win versus UCF?
I'm doing good. I thought it was a good win. I know we didn't have, I think, a ton of expectations really with UCF. Like they either could have competed or they could have just not shown up at all. And I think they kind of were somewhere in the middle, which was kind of surprising to me. I thought they had some times in the game where they had some good runs. They hit some shots that I definitely didn't expect them to hit. And I don't think it was at times to a huge cost to Arizona's deficient defense. I think some of them were just good Division 1 basketball players being able to hit contested shots and fight for loose balls and get some points. But Arizona stayed with the lead pretty much the game and they're able to ride it out. And I think that's the consistent thing that I've enjoyed to see them. And it reminded me a little bit of that Cincinnati game where they well, it was different because in the UCF game, they kind of had a pace going the whole game. But in the Cincinnati game, they really didn't, but they still found a way to win at the end. And it kind of felt in the last 2 minutes like UCF was like gonna make a run. And Arizona, they had a few possessions where they're kind of lackadaisical, but they were able to close it out. And I know UCF got a few baskets at the end, which if we put our bets in at over 10, that it would have nullified those. But they're last second buckets. But Arizona controlled the game for a majority of the entire game.
Yeah, they did control this game. They were up by only 3 points at halftime, but they expanded that lead throughout and held a steady lead during the second half of this game. UCF Keyshawn Hall had 22 points. Darius Johnson had 18 points. They combined for 40. They're two best players in this game. But I just think the difference was UCF was 22% from three-point land, and it just seemed like they couldn't make a shot or buy a shot from deep to save their life. And they were just very low percentage, not just from three, but from the field, 38%. You're not going to win a lot of games shooting like that. I did think Arizona was aggressive on defense. I thought they put out a pretty good effort on D. And their offense, like I mentioned, they had 5 players in double figures. They had 16 assists on 28 made field goals, and they just were 39% from three-point land. And just throughout every phase of this game, Arizona was the most consistent that I've seen them this season. You had Anthony Del Orso, Caleb Love lead the way with 16. You had KJ Lewis with 10. You had Vasar with 14 points, 5 rebounds. And I really think that the progression that this team has made in each conference game this season has been really big, from the TCU game to Cincinnati to West Virginia to now to UCF. They're continuing to grow as a team. They're continuing to play as a team, and they keep just gaining valuable experience that seems like it's helping them throughout each game here in conference play.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the committee approach, and especially it seems like the more that this group is able to just play together, it seems to be just helping them. They're understanding their roles. They're understanding when's the opportune time for them to try to put the ball in the hole, when to be aggressive, when to help get your teammate theirs. And I think that's been the main ingredient that's led to this huge 6 game winning
Yeah.
streak. And and especially like we're going to talk about later, like having to play the tough competition that they did in the first 2 months, I think also helped them kind of get a groove and get an understanding at certain times of what guys can do in certain spots and in certain rhythms of the game.
Yeah, for sure. A guy that had a bad game against West Virginia, that was Caleb Love. He bounced back, as I mentioned, with 16 points, 5 for 12 from the field, 4 3-pointers, 2 foul shots, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. He was really good in this game, and it was one of his better games this season in the sense that, Jordan, we talk all the time where it's the highest of highs, the lowest of lows for Caleb Love. And this was a game where he didn't score 20, he didn't score 30 points, but he figured out a way to positively affect the game in multiple areas while doing it at an efficient rate. He was a little under 50% from the field, but made 4 3-pointers in 7 attempts. So that's what you want to see from Caleb Love. And that I think is the best version of Caleb Love because there's going to be games, yes, where he scores 25, 30 and Arizona wins, but it's more likely than not that that's not going to happen because you can't count on that every single night. So I thought this was really good and really good for the growth of Caleb Love. What do you think of Love in this one?
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's kind of been the whole hallmark of him his whole career is his efficiency. And when you get up to the big leagues, the efficiency is the difference between you being in and out of the league in 2 years and you making hundreds of millions of dollars super quick.
100%.
And now at the college game, it's like you kind of need your best players to do that consistently, to be efficient, to for your team to be able to be in positions to win games, especially just the dramatic difference of the amount of shots that you get from the college game to the NBA. And that's going to be the biggest difference for this team is how efficient that he can be while still being aggressive, because that's especially with Caleb Love, the whole thing of like highs of highs, lows of lows, is he's got a shooter mentality that you love to have out of your shooters, where he's just going to shoot it until it goes in, and that'll help. But when it's done inefficiently and he's going 1 of 6, 1 of 8, 1 of 12, that's when you get eaten up a lot, especially when those are threes and those are long rebounds for transition for the other team to get up the floor. So those can be very simple ways of just cleaning up the box score, from adding points to your end to taking easy baskets away from them.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And yeah, like I said, that was one of his best performances to me this season in a long time for Arizona because he shot it pretty well and his rebounding was really good. He was getting others involved and it was great to see two other guys that played great in this game that I thought, although Trey Townsend only shot 2 for 8 from the field, still had 9 points, 3 rebounds, and more importantly, he combined with Toby Awaka for 20 points. And if you can get, well, we've seen them combine for 5 or less points, and so it's and 10 or less points. But if they can get combined for 15 to 20 points in a game, I really think that's helpful for Arizona because, like we've seen in the last game, you can't have Arizona's front court just giving you zero on offense. And I think those guys, I mean, Toby Awaka early on had a big dunk highlight reel for him, which was good. And I think that's what Arizona needs to do. They got him involved early in the offense, got him easy looks, and I think that's really good for him and for the flow of the offense.
Definitely, and those are two guys that pretty consistently it seems have struggled. And I know specifically Townsend, I think the expectation was he was going to be a 10 plus scorer a night kind of guy. And as we're at now, those expectations are quite a bit lower, just in how the roles of the team has been able to be carved out. And so those two guys are still in the 8-man rotation. And if those guys are combining for double digit points, as we've seen at least over the last month or so, those two guys are kind of the lower scorers on the team consistently. And so if those guys are able be efficient and give us points, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt, that is important. Like I said, this was a really positive game for Arizona to get things moving in the right direction. But overall, it's just great to see that Tommy Lloyd has this team back on track, has them in conference play at the top of the Big 12. I know it's early, but every game counts in this league. As we know, there's chaos that can occur any night from this conference. But was there anything else you saw from this UCF win that you took away?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty consistent for me. I think Henry Vasar scoring 14 points, a little lower on the rebound market, only 5, but he hit a few threes. I think that's a huge thing that just as Arizona fans, we don't really see very many stretch bigs able to hit threes, especially so far in this Tommy Lloyd era. We haven't really had any. Really, the last one we've had is Lowry Markkinen back in 2017. And outside of that, I think that's a really interesting thing that I know he's tried to get his shot off the ground a lot. He's got a good looking shot, and he just hasn't hit a ton of them this year. So it'll be interesting to see if he still keeps pulling the trigger from deep.
Yeah, it's great to see when you have a big man that can stretch out deep. It really helps everyone involved, really helps the team as a whole. But Jordan, before we get into Arizona's next game, their big game Tuesday night, they're hosting the Baylor Bears, the recently ranked number 25 Baylor Bears at 9 p.m. local time, 11 p.m. on the East Coast. It's on ESPN. This is a game I've said it for weeks. I had marked on my calendar from the beginning of the season. This is their first, to me, legit Big 12 game. I know they played teams ranked ahead of Baylor, but I value Baylor's experience from guys on their team, and I value their head coaching experience with Scott Drew. They're really good this year, I believe, and I think they're better than their ranking. We'll get into that and but before we get into that, I wanted to talk about rankings in general because Arizona has beaten two ranked teams in their last three games and still hasn't found themselves in the top 25. Pretty surprising to me. I'm not expecting them to be ranked 20 but they still beat number 16, beat number 21, West Virginia, and now they're in the top 3 to 4 teams receiving votes outside that top 25. What do you think of that? And do you think Arizona is already earned and deserves their way into that top 25, or do you think they need one more win here against Baylor to move their way into the top 25?
So I think they do need another, at least one more big win, especially with Baylor, another ranked win, which I think would be huge for them. But I think they will need that to at least get another bump to get into the rankings. But the thing with rankings is it's usually difficult because it's hard to place certain teams, especially when they've played other teams. Like you've said, they've beaten their most two of their recent games have been against ranked teams, but they've been right on the cusp of the bubble, just inside of it, like right usually around the 20s range. And so, especially you look at the updated rankings this week when you have Baylor at 25, I think Wisconsin's at 24.
Yep.
And so, the way Arizona looked against Wisconsin back in November, from one person to the next, it may differ, but you usually don't. And I say it differs because we'll see all the time in rankings where people will put one team above another when they literally just lost to that team, and it
Yeah,
doesn't make
it seems like it's
sense.
always when the teams play. Yeah, I always didn't agree with that, but it's all recency bias because it's
Yeah.
Arizona. If Arizona they have 5 losses, which obviously you can't lose a loss, but if they keep winning, then they're gonna have to move their way up eventually. And yeah, I kind of agree with the same sentiment as you were getting at there about Arizona. If they Baylor is ranked 25, so you would assume if Arizona beats
They
Baylor, they
replace
would.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. There's teams, a bunch of teams in that top 25 that have 4 losses, but there's not a 5 loss team yet in that top 25. But Arizona, like we've talked about in the past with their amount of quad one teams they've played and the strength of schedule that they've had this season is among the best in the country. So I think that helps Arizona's case right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And right now it's still early. Like they're only 4 games into conference season, as pretty much every conference is. And so that I think right now I think they're just getting the short end of the stick, especially since Wisconsin, a team that handedly beat them, is just getting back into the rankings after a tough start to their Big Ten play, although they're now 2-0 since they lost to Illinois a few weeks back. So it's
Mm,
getting to the point where the good teams are starting to, I think, slowly come out of the woodworks of their conferences, and if teams stay consistent, that's when they can make their rise. So I think Arizona, if they keep playing consistently the way they've been, I very easily see them in the next rankings, the very next week, because then at
yeah.
that point, there's going to be other teams in the top 25 that are going to have multiple losses too. You would think at least some of them, especially
Yeah.
with the way this college basketball season is went.
Yeah, 100%. And also, our by no means am I saying this is like this is, Arizona's getting kind of screwed here and they should 100% be ranked. I'm not saying that by any means. Arizona lost 5 of 7 games,
But they
and
got
I
a
don't
cake.
forget that
Yeah.
in November and December. They lost 5 of 7 games against a couple unranked teams at that time. So yeah, they have to, so they're 10-5 now, and they've had to win 6 games in a row to get to 10-5. So they've
Yep.
had to do a lot of work, and they got to do more work to make up and kind of make people forget about their shortcomings in early November and December. But Jordan, when we come right back, we're going to get into Arizona versus Baylor, Tommy Lloyd versus Scott Drew, the Bears versus the Wildcats when we're back next. All right, Jordan, we're back here on Bear Down Ballers and talked about it earlier about Arizona playing Baylor, and they play Baylor Tuesday night. It's a late one, local time 9 p.m. It's at McCall Center, but we know it doesn't matter what time it is in Tucson, Arizona. If the Arizona Wildcats are playing at the McCall Center, it will be electric. It will be must-see TV for sure. And now they have the Baylor Bears coming to town, and this, without a doubt, is Arizona's toughest test at home this season in Big-12 play. As we know, they have hosted Duke and they have played Wisconsin. They played a bunch of other good teams, Power Four schools in the battle for Atlantis, but now it's Big-12 play. It's Baylor, Arizona. It's former champion Scott Drew on the sideline across from Tommy Lloyd, who's unbelievable, great coach. And this Ballard team is a really guard heavy team. They really play four guard. They only really play 2 guys off the bench, only play about 7 guys, a lot of minutes. And 4 of those guys are guards. VJ Edgecombe, the 5-star freshman, has been excellent this season. He's averaging 12 points, 5 rebounds. He's shooting the ball 40 or he's shooting the ball 32% from three, but his fellow top rated freshman teammate, Robert Wright, the third, is coming off the bench. He's shooting 42% from three. They have 5 guys averaging double digits. Norchad Omier, the transfer from Miami, once again averaging a double double, 15 and 10 rebounds. So this team does a little bit of everything. They score a little over 80 points a game. Good 3-point shooting team, almost 37% a game. Arizona is the favorite in this one at -6. The over-unders 149.5. What do you think about this matchup with Baylor?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because I don't feel like they've really played a guard heavy team like this before. So it'll be, I think, interesting how they're going to game plan defensively and offensively against this, and kind of how they split up some of their minutes. And I remember earlier in the season I talked about Baylor on one of the main noteworthy games that I watched them play against Arkansas, when they just kind of ball screened the crap out of the Razorbacks in that game, and that helped them coast a win that and have a lead that they never really gave up. So it'll be interesting to see the kind of lineups that I think we throw at them with that, especially with kind of how well we've played with the ball screen. And I don't think we've really played a team that's really done it quite as well and as high efficiently as Baylor does it. Because it'll put you in precarious positions. Like you said, they're a very good 3-point shooting team. I think defensively, a big thing that they'll need to look for is be able to locate shooters. And I don't think necessarily they've done a great job of that this year, especially against some of the better shooting teams that they played. I know most noteworthy, I remember Nipple with Duke that we just couldn't find him at times, and he
Yeah.
whenever we'd have a run against Duke, he would end up with late in the shot clock with a wide open three. I know Wisconsin was the same way with John Tonje. He went crazy from three in that game. So I think it'll be super important for them to try to run the specific, at least the freshmen, off the 3-point line and see if they can kind of make them take the contested twos instead of wide open threes.
Yeah, 100%. That's true. Baylor this season is 11-4. They're fourth in the Big 12 right now, but just like Arizona, I mean, Baylor has lost to some really good teams. Most recently, last week, they lost to number three Iowa State. They did lose by 19 points. It was on the road against the top three team in the country and a staple at the top of the Big 12 the last couple years in Iowa State. They also lost to UConn a couple weeks ago, and they also lost to Tennessee. So they've had some marquee losses lately, but they're all to top teams. But they also bounce back. They beat Cincinnati just like Arizona did, and then they beat the Arizona State Sun Devils in overtime by 6 points in their previous game. Omir led them with 19 points in this one. So I think Arizona's going to have to be aggressive on defense. They're going to have to defend the 3-point line well, like you stated, too. But I think I think this is a very close matchup, but I think an X factor in this game is Jeremy Roach for Baylor. He was injured earlier in the year. He's played a couple of games since he's returned. He's been a little up and down, but he has that veteran experience, and he's a really just as solid of a guard in college basketball. But I think if Arizona can contain him under 10 points, which he's had in his last two games, I think Arizona will have a good shot of winning this. VJ Edgecombe is a physical guard. He's 6'4", I believe, and he likes to get downhill, get to the basket. And so he's not the best shooter, but as I mentioned, Robert Wright is a really good shooter, along with Jaden Nunn. So I think if Arizona can be aggressive, can try to force these guys inside the paint and not let their good shooters get open shots, I think Arizona will have a good shot to win here. I think we're both kind of surprised about this line. Arizona's a 6-point favorite. I think Arizona's going to win this game. I don't think Arizona's going to cover. I think this is going to be a very close game. I think this is going to be their closest game in a long time this season, of 100% their closest game throughout in the entire contest of Big 12 play. I think Arizona's going to win this game by 4 points. Think Baylor will cover in this one, but I think it'll be a high scoring matchup that will be just toe to toe throughout between two of the best teams in the Big 12. And I think Arizona will come out on top and move to 5-0 in the Big 12. What do you think in this game?
Yeah, I'm thinking similar lines. I think it'll be one possession. I think it'll be 3 points or 2 points. And I think it's ironic because I think 2 weeks ago we are talking about one of the main weaknesses of this Arizona team. But over the last 2 weeks, I think one of the biggest strengths for this team has been their front court and the productivity they've gotten from their front court. And I think alongside with that strength, I think that's a weakness for Baylor. They really have only one guy in their rotation that's over 6 foot, 6'7", to defend. I think Henry Vasar and Toby Awaka. So I expect them to continue to feed those guys and continue to see if they can lean on those guys offensively in a big matchup, right? in a big matchup against Baylor, and I think they're going to play well as they have been, and I think because of that, I think Arizona is going to squeak out on top by 3.
Yeah, so we're similar there, along with containing Jeremy Roach and keeping him under 10 points. Another big thing I think Arizona needs to do a good job of is rebounding the basketball because as we've seen, they've been very up and down with that, with their front court, with guys like Owaka. Love had a great rebounding game this past week. Townsend's been up and down, so inconsistent rebounding the basketball. So I think they need to be better there. I think that Vasar has been improved there, and I think he can see more minutes in this one because between Norchad, Omir, who's averaging over 10 and a half rebounds per game. And then you got Josh O, the big 7-footer, who I don't want to try to mispronounce his last name, but he has been just dominant as of late, rebounding the basketball. He's only averaging a little over 7 per game, but he 3 out of the last 5 games, he's had double-digit rebounds. So this guy is a real force at by mistake. He's not 7 foot. He's 6'10", so he's still close. And I think that Arizona will need to play some of their bigger lineups in this game to defend those two elite rebounders. But overall, Jordan, I think this one should be a great game. It's two of the best programs in college basketball going toe to toe. Any final thoughts before we sign off today?
Yeah, I think one thing just to I think continue your point about rebounding and how big of a thing that's going to be, especially teams for our viewers that don't know, teams that shoot the three ball a lot or contend like a majority of the time on misses, they're going to be long misses. And so your front court, your big guys that are around the rim primarily are not going to have as much opportunities to get those balls if they're bouncing way outside of the paint. And so that's where the guards I think also are really going to have to help out in the rebounding department. And I know they've done a good job of that, and I think they're going to continue to need to do that and to be aggressive and especially the way that they like to get in transition. I think securing rebounds is going to be paramount for them this week, especially in preventing offensive rebounds for Baylor.
Yeah, this game like I said, I've been looking forward to. This should be a highly competitive basketball game, and this is to me a real borderline and it's a real mark of where Arizona is at this season because they have won 6 straight games. They've beaten two ranked teams, as we've said in the last 3 matchups. But if they can advance that to 7 and win their third game over a ranked opponent, I think it's time to start talking about Arizona being legit, being a legit threat to win the Big 12, to be a top 4 seed in March Madness, to be a threat to make a Final Four. And I think that is all in play. But first, you got to get past Scott Drew. You got to get past the Baylor Bears, and that'll happen Tuesday night. That game will take place in Tucson, Arizona. But that's all we have time for today. I'm Ryan Wall. He's Jordan Pollock. Follow us on X at Bear AZ Pod. Follow the Field of 68. And we will have another episode before Saturday's game at Texas Tech. But until